Now just open your eyes and become alert and awake. Okay, thank you for all of you for joining us today. I'm not going to give a structured talk. I'm just going to talk casually about some things related to meditation. And I remember when I came to Sri Lanka in 1976, it was very, very rare to meet any lay people who were practicing meditation. Meditation seemed to be very, very uncommon. Now, of course, some people who did their puja in the evening, they might sit for 5 or 10 minutes with their eyes closed. But I'm talking about proper meditation, serious meditation. I think it's also good to remember that not many monks meditate either. The average monk is concerned with paying next month's electric bills and running the Dhampasala and going to danas and funerals and what have you. So I don't think meditation was very popular amongst the Sangha either. Monks who did have interest in meditation would generally leave the village or the town monastery and go to an aranya. But in the 20 years that I was in Sri Lanka, I couldn't but help notice that one quite positive change I noticed, and other people have noticed, is a revival of interest amongst lay people in meditation. And when we consider that the last two steps on the Buddha's Noble Eightfold Path pertain to meditation, then that, of course, is a very good sign. Nonetheless, since that time, I've also noticed some problems with the enthusiasm for meditation. And even in Sri Lanka and in the time I spent in Singapore, I did notice certain things that sometimes I would meet people who I knew, and I noticed that those who were meditating, sometimes some of them improved considerably. They became happier, more relaxed. They developed more devotion to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. I just hold on, I noticed my battery's going flat. I apologize for that. So I noticed that some people benefited from their meditation. Then I noticed that some people didn't seem to be many positive changes at all. And I even noticed that some people seem to have developed quite negative and unhelpful behavior as a result of their meditation. They became strict and unsmiling, very rigid, overly concerned about little things, very argumentative about meditation, that only this is the right way. I follow that teacher, I don't follow this teacher, and so on. So I don't think simply meditating itself is sufficient for it to be working positive changes in a person's life. The next thing that I've noticed, which I think is very unfortunate, is a very wide diversity of opinions about meditation. Some teachers say this is the only right way, other people say that is, and some people say this is jhana, and other people say no, it isn't, that is the jhanas. And they argue about what sankharas mean and so on. That seems to be quite common. And the third thing that I've noticed, which I think is not very constructive or positive, is I've heard many teachers say that it's easy. Quite often, as I'm going through YouTube, I look up meditation and I find there's so many people giving guidance on how to become enlightened, how to become awakened, as if it's something like you just go down to the shops and buy it and you've got it. I think that this is unfortunate too. And I think the reality is that other than just superficial meditation, developing deep and enduring spiritual benefits, not only is it not easy, it also requires total commitment. And I think most people, even though they think they might be completely committed to the practice, most people probably are not. Having said this, I also say that there are some very good teachers who don't fall into these traps and encourage their students not to. In the last few decades in Sri Lanka, there have been several excellent teachers. My good friend Venerable Dhammajiva would be an example. There are several lay people teaching meditation who I think are very good also. So having said that, is there some sort of approach to meditation that the Buddha taught which anybody can use as a map or a guide to their practice? And there is. Apparently last month, the speaker you had gave a talk on one of the discourses in the Digha Nikaya, the Aganya Sutta, a very interesting sutta. So this afternoon I'd like to talk about some aspects of another sutta in the Digha Nikaya, which is one of my favorite, and that is the Samannaphala Sutta. It's the second discourse in the Digha Nikaya. And very briefly, this is the background. King Ajatasattu had murdered his father in order to claim the throne. The desire for power was too strong, even stronger than his regard and his love for his father, and he had him killed. And then, after the initial delight in now becoming king, he started to feel guilty for what he had done. And one evening he was talking to some of the people in his court, in the royal court, one of them being the physician Jivaka. And he asked Jivaka if he knew anybody he could go to who could put his mind to rest. And of course, being a disciple and a supporter of the Buddha, Jivaka said, well, why don't you go to see the Buddha? He happens to be in Rajagaha right now. The king agreed to that. They mounted some elephants and off they went to Jivaka's mango grove, where apparently the Buddha was staying that evening. And as they were going along the road, suddenly the king had a panic attack because Jivaka had told him that there was a large number of people and a large number of monks who had gathered to listen to the Buddha talk. And yet he couldn't hear the sound of anybody. So the road was dark, the moon was out, but still there was a great deal of darkness and no noise. And suddenly he had a panic attack. He thought that maybe Jivaka was leading him into a trap where he could be murdered. So Jivaka put his mind at rest and said, have no fear, Your Highness. I'm not trying to lead you into a trap. Let's keep on going. And eventually they arrived at the mango grove. And Ajatasattu met the Buddha. And after small talk, he asked the Buddha, almost a challenge, can you, Reverend Sir, show me something here and now which would be a benefit of the spiritual life? I think that's a very interesting question. So kings or prime ministers or politicians are practical people. We don't want airy-fairy things. We want, show me something practical. I don't care about what's going to happen to me after I die. Don't tell me about heaven. Tell me something or show me something that is of benefit to the spiritual life here and now, not hereafter. A good question. So the Buddha then said, well, have you asked some other teachers this? And he said, yes, I have. Now, I'm not going to go into what those teachers were or what they said, but basically the king said yes, he had gone to other people and asked them this same question, and he never really got an intelligent answer. So then the Buddha proceeded to tell him his map, the map that the Buddha had laid out for anybody wanting to practice meditation and gain the benefits of it here and now. And there are quite a few of them, and some of them would not be relevant to any of you or even to me, because none of us, nor I, have reached those high exalted states. But 8 of the steps that the Buddha talked about would be relevant to anybody, myself and yourselves. And what are those 8 steps? That's what we'll talk about today. So the first step is that one comes across an enlightened teacher. What the Buddha was referring to here was the situation at that time, and the enlightened teacher was himself. We don't know whether there's any enlightened people today. I suspect there are, but generally they don't have a badge or they don't have an enlightenment ID card, so sometimes it's hard to know. However, there are some good teachers, and even some teachers who do not have any deep and profound spiritual experiences, they may nonetheless know the Dhamma well and be able to explain it for others. So the first step that the Buddha talks about is actually hearing the Dhamma being proclaimed. Now, most of you are, in fact, I'm sure that all of you are from a traditional Buddhist background. You live in a country where the majority of people are Buddhists, and a country where Buddhism has been the predominant religion for pretty much over 2,000 years. So it's very likely that you have heard the Dhamma at one time or another. Some of you, if you're long-time members of the friends of, just remind me, Manouri, what was it, your society meets at Maitri Hall?
Servants of the Buddha, Bhante. Servants.
That's right. So, please forgive me, but my memory is getting really quite bad now. The servants of the Buddha, how could I possibly forget? So if you're a member, or at least you go sometimes, you will hear the Dhamma. So the next step is, or if the next step then arises, the next step is to have saddha. You don't know whether the person who you heard the Dhamma from is enlightened or not, but you listen to the Dhamma, you hear it, it makes sense, and saddha arises. You have at least some confidence that this path is a path worth treading. So that's the next step, saddha. I think my experience in Sri Lanka is that most people I've ever met in Sri Lanka had at least some saddha. They may not have practiced the Dhamma very well, or they may not have known a lot of Dhamma or very deep, but they did have saddha. I remember once going to the Maligawa in Kandy, and I was standing there watching people put flowers on the big table in front of the room where the Dalada is, and they were putting sunflowers and other flowers, and the perfume coming from it was really, really very lovely. And there must have been a group of people who have come from some village, maybe a busload of them have come to Kandy to see the Maligawa. And I remember looking at the faces of some of the elderly women and some of the elderly men as they put the flowers on the shrine. You could see a certain light in their eyes. I suspect probably most of them would have not had a very deep understanding of the Dhamma, probably very basic village type Dhamma, but you could see very clearly a very deep and probably very strong saddha. With the right motivation and the right help, they would probably be able to move ahead spiritually very well. And in Sri Lanka, I've met many people like that. So step number 2 is one has saddha. Saddha really can give you energy and determination and sticking power. The next step that the Buddha talks about is, okay, you hear the Dhamma, faith arises, and the next step is pabbajja. And you probably know the Pali word pabbajja means to go forth. And what it meant at the time of the Buddha, and what he meant by that, is one leaves one's family and one's worldly life and becomes a monk, or at that time also maybe a nun, a bhikkhu or a bhikkhuni. You put aside all your worldly ambitions and what have you, and you dedicate yourself fully to this quest, the quest for enlightenment. Now, none of you, I imagine, have done that. So we could interpret this in our day and age, and for the audience that I'm speaking to, as taking the Dhamma seriously, not just reading a book or giving dana or something, but studying it well, practicing it to the best of one's ability, so that it is the most important thing in one's life. Because we know, even at the time of the Buddha, there were lay people who became arahats. And I think that it is possible today. But I don't think we could interpret this pabaja for the average layperson as having a deeper commitment in the Dhamma. So you hear the Dhamma, faith arises, you develop a strong commitment, and step number 4 is what do you take seriously? Well, the first thing you take seriously is morality, sila. Now, in the sutta, in the Samannaphala Sutta, the Buddha describes this as, first of all, the 5 precepts. And then he adds quite a lot of other things to that. I'm not going to go into all of them, but I think it's important to understand and to remember that in Buddhism, sila is not just the 5 precepts. The 5 precepts are the bare minimum. Anything less than that, and really you can't be said to have a deep and strong sila. Not to harm or hurt anything, not to steal anything, not to sexually abuse others, not to lie, and not to drink. Now I know lots of Buddhists who, and I think it's quite common in Sri Lanka, that the 5 precepts just doesn't get a lot of traction. But I also think that probably after that, the next precept that doesn't get a lot of practice is the 4th one. I think that the average person lies a lot. I think lies most people tell are perhaps not important. So, for example, somebody asked me to give a talk, and I just don't want to. So I tell them, I say, what day do you want? And they say, next Friday? Oh, I'm busy next Friday. Now, I'm not saying that I've ever done that, but I'm giving that as an example of not really an important lie, but it is a lie nonetheless. So even practicing the 5 precepts takes some commitment. Somebody who does their best not to kill, steal, lie, and certainly not to take alcohol or other drugs. And then the Buddha mentions something very interesting. He says, as a result of sincere, genuine, and complete sila, you develop something called anavajja sukha. Anavajja sukha. And that means the happiness of being innocent, or the happiness of being morally pure, or an exact translation would be the happiness of being blameless. You can't be blamed. You have a clear conscience. Even if other people don't know, even if other people don't care, you know and you care that you adhere to the precepts the best you can. And the Buddha says that this gives you a certain level of happiness. Then the next step is, and now it starts to get more important. The next step is Indriya Samvara. And I'm a great believer in Indriya Samvara. I think that nobody can really make progress in meditation unless they practice Indriya Samvara. And what is Indriya Samvara? Well, it's usually translated as guarding the door of the senses. Listening to Dhamma talks and reading books on Buddhism, on meditation, that I very, very rarely see this given any attention. What does it mean? Well, the door of the senses, well, the senses are the eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, touch sensation, and so on. And the door of the senses is exactly that, the point at which the external world meets our senses. So what does guarding the door of the senses mean? Well, in the general process of living, we frequently come into contact with sensory stimulation that is very unhelpful if we're trying to calm and focus our minds. So, for example, if you wanted to take meditation very seriously, and yet you spent a great deal of time every Saturday going to a party, or a disco or something like that, chances are your meditation is not going to get off the ground. Why? Because even if you were to meditate 3 or 4 times a week, the sensory experience you had when you went to that dance or that party or something would resonate in your mind for at least 3 or 4 days. I find nowadays that I try to keep in touch with what's going on in the world, but increasingly I don't do that anymore, simply because it feeds into my mind all sorts of things that I might worry about or become annoyed about or to become angry about or to feel sad about. And the reality is that makes meditation very, very difficult. And you often meet people who are trying to meditate and you ask them how they're going and they say, well, I just can't stop this continual procession of thoughts and visual images and what have you. Anybody who has tried to meditate will have that experience. Many people end up giving up meditation because they find that they just cannot come to terms with all this inward chatter. One thing that can help is Indriya Samvara, guarding the door of the senses. Spending a bit more time in silence, spending a bit more time just sitting quietly, or even just doing whatever work you have to do while avoiding any unnecessarily sensual stimulation. Okay, so then the Buddha says that's the next step. And I think with this step, anybody taking meditation seriously would have to say that this requires some significant adjustment in one's daily routine. However, the rewards are very good, because the Buddha mentions the reward for this in the next step, step number 7, and that is avyaseka sukha. As a result of guarding the doors of the senses, you experience avyaseka sukha. And what does that mean? An exact translation would be the happiness of being unaffected. Sukha, of course, means happiness or joy. The happiness of being unaffected. Unaffected by what? Unaffected by all this sensory stimulation. So usually we seek out sensory stimulation because we experience it as pleasurable. When you get to this stage, there is an interesting switch. Previously, I chased after sensual images, sensual sounds, sensual tastes, and so on, because it gave me pleasure. Now that I am putting them aside or trying to avoid them where possible, not seeking them out, now I feel avyaseka sukha. Previously, I felt pleasurable or happy because my senses were stimulated. Now I feel happy or a happiness as a result of not being sensually stimulated. It's almost an exact reverse. As a result of this, you don't feel the need to be overly stimulated, and the mind starts to calm down. So, hearing the Dhamma, having faith, going forth, practicing morality, experiencing anavajja sukha, the happiness of being unaffected, guarding the door of the senses, experiencing indriya samvara, guarding the door of the senses, indriya samvara. As a result of that, avyaseka sukha, you start to feel even more joyful, more happy. It's not a jumping for joy happiness, it's a calm, serene happiness. That's the seventh step. And what's the next step? The next step is mindfulness and clear comprehension. Sati Sampajanya. Now we come to the step that is talked about very widely nowadays. Everybody wants to practice mindfulness. That's a good thing. But I suspect many people have not thought of these steps that lead up to being able to practice that mindfulness successfully. What do we mean by mindfulness and how do we practice it? Well, if you read what the Buddha says in the Samannaphala Sutta, it's very interesting what he says. He doesn't mention meditation or doing meditation as we usually understand it. I'm going to read from the sutta. And how is one accomplished in mindfulness and clear comprehension? Here, one acts with clear awareness in going forward and going back, in looking ahead and looking behind, in bending and stretching, in wearing his clothes, his outer robe or his inner robe, in carrying his bowl, in eating, in drinking, in chewing, in swallowing, in going to the toilet, in defecating and urinating, in walking, standing, sitting, lying down, in speaking and keeping silent. He acts with mindfulness and clear comprehension. In this way, he becomes accomplished in mindfulness and clear comprehension. Now here he mentions nearly 20 activities, and only one of them is sitting. Isn't that interesting? Now I know people who go to meditation, mindfulness courses, and they spend several hours sitting in meditation. I'm not saying that that's bad, it isn't. But here the Buddha is expanding it far more than what we usually think. if you look at all of these together, it's all about living on acting and doing what any normal person would do. Going forth and going back. Well, going to catch the bus to go to work, coming back. Looking ahead and looking behind. I'm doing that all the time right now. Putting your clothes on, taking them off. And the most interesting one is even when you're on the toilet, when you go to the toilet. Isn't that interesting? Imagine going to the meditation course and, okay, teacher, what do I have to do? Well, go to the toilet and do it mindfully. So what his understanding of mindfulness here is not just sitting, that would be an important part of it, but being mindful, being aware of what you're doing in everything you do in your daily life. Now, this is not necessarily easy, but that should be the goal. I'll tell you what I do to facilitate this practice. From time to time, I think of some activity that I do every day. So one thing I do is I get out of bed and I put my clothes on, and then I go to the bathroom and wash my mouth out and so on. So I make a commitment to myself. From the time I put my feet on the floor to the time I get out of the bathroom, I'm going to try not to just daydream or think about what I'm going to do today. I'm just going to try to do everything that I do with awareness. Another thing I do is sometimes I clean the floor, I vacuum the floor. I have a practice. One of my disciplines is from the time I plug the vacuum cleaner in and turn it on to the time I turn the vacuum cleaner off and unplug it, I try to do that vacuuming, not dreaming about what I'm going to do after I finish, just being aware of what I am doing. That is how the Buddha describes mindfulness and clear comprehension in the Samannaphala Sutta. Now, another thing that can help you become more aware as you live your daily life is having a regular sitting practice. I would say that this is something of great importance. At least for 20 minutes or half an hour a day, simply sitting and being aware of what you are doing. And the main thing that you become aware of if you're sitting quietly, without talking, in a quiet room, with your eyes closed, is the first thing you notice is that you're breathing. Nothing special about that. You breathe all of the time. But now what you're doing is you're becoming aware that you are breathing. So this is what the Buddha would call mindfulness of breathing, anapanasati. Why did he teach this? Because it's a practice that anybody can do and benefit from. So if you have a regular practice like that, and you start to develop some awareness, then that awareness will flow from your sitting practice into your daily life. Into everything? No, certainly not. But into more things. And then you're able to live with awareness, go about your job with awareness. So that's what the Buddha means by mindfulness and clear comprehension in this sutta. Now, I'm not going to talk about anything else beyond this, because the next thing he talks about is, as a result of this, one develops contentment. And then he starts talking about overcoming or suspending temporarily the five hindrances and then attaining the jhanas. But for most of us, this, we can only talk about that theoretically because we haven't got to that stage yet. Anybody who's taking meditation seriously, I think it's very important that they lay the foundations of achieving that state by these 8 stages beforehand. That makes your practice possible. So that's what that's how the Buddha laid out a map of training for anybody who is wanting to practice at least the second last and the last steps on the Noble Eightfold Path. Those of you who have not read the Samannaphala Sutta, I would encourage you to read it. It's one of the most inspiring suttas as far as I'm concerned. I think this has been my guide to my practice for many years, and it has held me in good stead, and I hope it would for you too. Okay, so that's about all I've got to say for today. If there's anything anybody would like to ask, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much, Bhante. As always, very clear, very simple, but the central core of what we have to know. Much merit to you, Bhante. I'm sure there are a lot of comments and questions and interest generated. Samantha?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Manouri. Thank you, Bhante. That was a very helpful guidance and a reminder for my daily practice, because I do meditation, but I'm not regular as I should be, like practicing every day, 1 hour in the morning and 1 hour in the evening. I have my intentions, but because of other work and everything, I tend to sort of like not keep the habit. But thank you. Your guidance really inspired me to make it a bit more of a habit now. And I'd like to read that sutta. So what was the name of that sutta, Bhante? Are you able to put it in the chat?
Samannaphala. Let me.
What is it? Or SN? Is it Majjhima Nikaya or?
No,
it's the second sutta in the Digha Nikaya.
Digha Nikaya.
And I think it's right at the beginning of the Digha Nikaya because it's such an important one. Incidentally, this is not the only sutta where the Buddha gives this formula or this map, but this is a particularly important one, a particularly good example of it.
Thank you, Bhante.
Do you have a copy? Do you have a copy of the Digha Nikaya? There is a translation. There's 2 or 3 quite good translations.
Yeah, I haven't actually got the Digha Nikaya, no, Bhante. I've got the Majjhima Nikaya and the other one, SN Samyutta Nikaya, but I can get it from the internet.
You can, indeed.
So that's available, isn't it? Yeah. Thank you, Bhante.
When you do read it, take note of how frequently the Buddha talks about the experience of joy. Sometimes he calls it sukha piyati, joy and happiness. And once again, I'm not so sure that I see this pointed out all of the time. But on most of the steps, as it proceeds, the Buddha says that one of the results of this is you become happier. And I always used to laugh when I used to teach meditation at Nilambe. Sometimes we'd get 30 or 40 people. In those days, they were mainly foreigners, tourists who wanted to do meditation. And I always would make a joke on about the 4th or the 5th day. And I'd always say, what's wrong with you people? I haven't seen anybody smile for the last 4 days. You're going to a funeral or something? When people go to meditation centers, they walk around as if they're going to a funeral. The best way to know that your meditation is working, that you're doing the right thing, is that you're more at ease. And being at ease is generally experienced as an experience of happiness. And certainly it's pointed out by the Buddha in this sutta and some others as well. Yes, please do have a look at it on the internet. You undoubtedly get it there.
Thank you, Bhante. And I think you reminded me the secret of the meditation, the happiness. So once you get that happiness, I think you probably, that spiritual happiness, you might want to sort of like really latch onto it and increase my meditation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know, there's. I'll just add one thing to it. There is a place where the Buddha says, he's talking to his monks. He says that when you start meditating well, your rag robes, your pansakula, is that the word? Yes, the pansakula. Your rag robes will appear to you as if they are beautiful embroidery, which I find that's a very lovely statement. He said, of course, monks don't wear rag robes nowadays, but in those days they did. Their robes were not like our fancy ones that we wear nowadays. They were made out of scraps of cloth and what have you, but pretty basic body covering. And he said, when you experience the joy of meditation, your rag robes will appear to you. It'll be as if they are beautifully embroidered cloth. Interesting. Anything else anybody would like to ask or comment on?
Thank you, Bhante. That's very encouraging. Sadhu, sadhu.
Bhante, Samantha spoke to you from England, and Bhante is on an island off the coast of Queensland in Australia. So I'm very happy. I find joy in that, thinking how easily.
Well, England's an island too, isn't it? It's somewhat bigger than this one, but there you go.
Sri Lanka is also the island.
But
any other questions? Bhante, Samannaphala Sutta is a long one. So
it is.
Yeah.
But if you, one of the, when the Buddha asked the king, have you asked anybody else this question before? He says yes, and I think he mentioned 6 or 7 other teachers that he went to, and he describes their teaching. If you take that part out of it, because it's really not, it's basically a critique or criticism of these other teachers, of their philosophy. If you take that out of it, then the sutta's not too long. You get to the essence of it rather than this sort of sidetrack. So I always encourage people to skip that part because it's not really necessary for the essence of what the Buddha has to say.
And in the Satipatthana Sutta, what Bhante read out to us about, when you go forward or backwards or stretch your arms or wear your clothes or whatever, that same sort of paragraph or list is there, isn't it? About
the same paragraph, word for word the same, yes.
We have a message from Dr. Soma De Silva. She's one of our directors.
I can see it. I'll read it out. Venerable Bhante, much merit to you for your excellent talk explaining steps in meditation. It is said that we need to do Silanussati as a preparation for Anapanasati or other meditation. Could you kindly explain Silanussati without becoming attached to oneself, thinking my sila is pure, much merit. Yes, I think I mentioned this. I think the last talk I gave for the servants of the Buddha was on the anusatis, one of which is silanusati.
Yeah.
So my understanding of this, as I said at that time, and I'll repeat, is I think most people, the majority of people are not bad people. They're not particularly bad. And I think the majority of people are basically thoughtful and kind. Not everybody, but as long as we're not under pressure. And my experience is that people want to do good and to be good. And one of the reasons they do is because it wins them friends, it wins them respect from others, and generally it makes you feel good. Soma's question is, how do you do Silanusati? So this is what I think. As soon as you talk about Sila to people who are taking the Dhamma seriously, they think of really important things like helping lepers or giving a large donation to somebody or something like that. Becoming like Mother Teresa, spending your whole life helping others. But it seems to me, if you observe people, you see them doing little good things quite often. Letting another person go ahead of them in a line, or just smiling to them as their eyes meet the person coming in the opposite direction on the pavement, or saying thank you. So, and I think most people think these things are not important, but in actual fact, I think they are. Each one of them is of not much significance. But if you look at them all together, then maybe they are important, they are significant. And that's what I think Silanusati is. So how I do Silanusati is I sit, I close my eyes, and I think back over the last week or the last 4 days or something like that. And I think of every time that I went out of my way to help somebody, to thank somebody, just to make somebody's life a little easier or a little more pleasant. And I can usually think of a lot of them. Letting somebody go first, or giving somebody a seat, or whatever it happens to be. I think that that's very important. And it seems to me that if you are practicing mindfulness, you'll notice when you do that, and it'll be easier for you to remember it when you're doing Silanusati. Now, you've mentioned something, where is it? I think you mentioned something like, how can you do it without sort of feeling proud, is it? Or could you kindly explain Silanusati without becoming attached to oneself, thinking my Sila is pure? Yeah, that would be certainly not helpful. I would just say, just rejoice, because that's what it says in the Dhammapada. He rejoices here, he rejoices here, there, he rejoices both here and there when he calls to mind his good actions. What's wrong with that? I don't think, for the average person, I don't think that will lead to feeling superior or feeling proud. If it does, then I'd say you need to come to terms with that. I'm in a position where people often thank me for helping them in some way. something I said, or I shared something with them and that. And when they do thank me, I like that. It makes me feel happy. But I don't think it has led me to feeling superior, better than others, because I know full well that I'm not always like that. I tell a story about something that happened to me. I was on a short trip from Singapore to Australia, staying in a Buddhist society, and one day a woman rang up and said, "I'm interested in Buddhism, can I come and talk to you?" So I said, "Yeah, come." So she came. She was actually an Israeli. She was in Australia because her husband was doing a job there. Anyway, we had quite a long talk. And about a week later, she rang me again and said, "May I come again?" I said, "Yeah." So she came and she brought me a very nice cake as a sort of a dana, which was very kind of her. And once again, we have a nice talk. And that was it. I never saw her again. Then about 3 or 4 years later, I got a letter from, I could see from the stamp, the letter was from Israel. So I don't know anybody in Israel. I opened this letter and it was from that woman. And she had just said that she had just recently taken the 3 refuges and the 5 precepts, a small Buddhist society in Tel Aviv. And she had been going there for some time and she finally decided to become a Buddhist. And she said, just after in front of a monk, that she took the 3 refuges and the 5 precepts, she thought of me. And that what I had done and what I had shared with her brought her to where she is now. And she's very happy that she's now considers herself a Buddhist. And she said, nothing in particular. I've just written to thank you. I tell you what, I kept that letter for a long time. And that's not the first time that's happened. Usually I don't get thanks in the form of a letter and with a nice cake as well. But when you do good, don't put yourself down. Neither pump yourself up. But yes, you have permission to feel good about it. And there's one other thing that goes with Silanasati. Having done that, then next time you do it, think about the good that others have done to you. Little things that they may have done to make your life a little easier, a little better, a little more pleasant. And that can counter the possibility of you becoming puffed up. So that's what I would say about that.
Much merit to you, Bhante. It makes things very clear to me now, much clearer. Thank you. I was worried about feeling, I am good. So there's that, reflection on me, myself. So I was struggling to understand that and get over that. So you made it clear. Thank you so much.
Okay, good. I'm glad. And there's another one, is it? Chaya?
Chaya.
Then
Chaya is, Chaya
Bhante
is writing
Dhammika,
from the
much.
UK.
Oh,
Could I please ask you to expound a bit more on guarding the sense doors? I personally find it difficult. Is that?
well, let me
Difficult?
read it. Venerable Bhante, much merit to you for your excellent talk. Could I please ask you to expound a bit more on guarding the sense doors? I personally find it difficult to limit watching TV. Well,
She goes on a little more, Bhante.
well, I can't see the
TV
rest of it.
and
TV
go into
and go
phases of
to
binging.
phases of binging. Oh, goodness me.
Some
advice
advice would be hugely appreciated.
Okay, well, let's say turn the damn thing off. Also, I think there may be, I mean, I watch YouTube. I don't watch it all the time, but the things I watch, I find interesting without necessarily being sensually having my senses stimulated. So, for example, occasionally I watch BBC Nature. There are lovely things about nature and animals and what have you. I don't find myself all worked up and excited when it's finished. On the contrary, sometimes I feel sort of quite happy to see natural environment. So it may not, but also I think probably if you're watching it a lot, chances are you're watching a lot of stuff which is just feeding more images into your mind and not helping. How you can do that is just unplug the damn television. In other words, a little bit of discipline, a little bit of self-discipline might be necessary there.
Bhante, thank you so much. That's actually really helpful. I think I'll switch to, like you, nature programs, because that'll be a lesser evil than, watching sitcoms. I don't do it all the time.
I would say sitcoms are not an evil. Huh? These are things that people enjoy and enrich their lives and make their lives more happy, and that's okay. But somebody taking meditation, making meditation serious, is not that they see all this other stuff as evil. It's not evil. It's just not helpful for this new path that you're embarking on. That's all. Huh?
Of course.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Bhante. Much appreciated.
Are you speaking from the UK also?
I am, yes.
He's a psychiatrist in the UK.
There's a wonderful word in English, a killjoy. You know what a killjoy is?
Yes, Bhante.
Don't become a killjoy. Yeah. Don't become holy. You sometimes meet Christians like this. Oh, they're a real pain in the neck. They're just so holy and everything else is evil. Don't become like that. This is, or should be, a joyful path, not judging and not becoming all stern and ultra serious. And don't do that. People like that are never happy. Yeah. Don't remember that. Do not become a Buddhist killjoy.
Thank you, Bhante. It's really good advice. Yeah, I do try to meditate as much as I can. It's just what you said about guarding the sense doors kind of struck me, and I felt that I want to work a bit more on that. Thank you very much. And also I wanted to say one more thing, just to kind of express my deep gratitude to you to giving us one of our best meditation teachers, Venerable Dhammajiva. Thank you so much.
I'll be in Sri Lanka in a few months. I hope to meet him again after quite a few years.
He mentions your name in almost all of his sermons.
Yes, I tell him to stop doing that. People will think I'm paying him to say all those nice things about me.
Today he's not here because I didn't send that link to him, thinking he was probably not in Sri Lanka or just about come. But I'll send the recording.
Yeah, and then he'd spend all his time saying about how wonderful I am.
There is another question, Bhante.
Right.
Can you see it? From Mahendra Gunsal Korala. Can you see it, Bhante, on chat? What advice would you give to a person, like a good friend of mine, who is in constant discomfort from physical illness and wants to practice meditation with the hope of obtaining some relief?
I see. Right, I see it, yes. Well, that would depend on what his problem is. There is a chap in the United States who is specialized in this very problem. He's an expert in pain management. I'm just trying to think of his name. You might ask your friend to, or you may do it for him or her, to go to, say, Google search and put in mindfulness or mindful pain management. And this guy has written quite a few books on the subject, specializing in exactly this problem. And mindfulness can actually help. It takes some training in that, but it can actually, in fact, it was this guy's writings that first sort of alerted health experts and psychiatrists and psychologists to the value of mindfulness going back 10, 15 years ago. I'm sorry, I just cannot remember his name right now. But that's what I'd encourage your friend to do, or maybe you can do it for him. Go to a search engine and put in mindful pain management or pain management and mindfulness. I'm sure it will come up because it has a very good reputation of helping people with long-term chronic illnesses and pain. I just can't think of that person's name. That's what I would recommend you do.
As a meditation method, Bhante, the pain, maybe not such severe pain or what this person has, but in sitting posture, say after a while there is pain. Can you give us some guidance on how we do that? Because we have to focus on the pain.
I see what you mean.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you're sitting long term, there will be some discomfort. I'm not a great fan of sitting until it's really painful. I can't really see much point in that. I know there is one particular meditation technique where the whole purpose of it is to create pain so that you can look at it and that can help you understand dukkha. I think that's a silly thing. I really do. I'm sorry. And in actual fact, there are quite a few places in the Tipitaka where the Buddha says, when he's talking about sitting meditation, where he says that such and such makes you happy or creates happiness, and the mind that is happy becomes concentrated. In other words, he links these two things together. Now, it is certainly possible to be mindful, alert, and detached when you're in pain. But I think pain in meditation is quite a useful thing in that it tells you that something's not right. Okay? You're sitting in such a way that you're causing your legs or the muscles in your legs to cramp, or the blood's not circulating properly. That's not good. So a balance between moving every time there's a little bit of discomfort and then sitting, through a long time through a great deal of pain, so it's even difficult to get up, it's painful to get up, I really can't see myself much point in that. So finding a balance between those two, and generally speaking, I think that sitting on it, if you have continual pain in your legs, to sit in a chair, the way I'm sitting now. There's nothing special about sitting with your legs crossed. You should be able to meditate in any, as it says in the sutta, standing, sitting, walking, lying down. Now, I never recommend people lie down when they're meditating because it's a bit easier to fall asleep. But I do think that finding a comfortable posture and sitting sitting like that is helps your meditation. There's no doubt about it. And not giving in to every little irritation. And when there are irritations, I always say that there are three ways of moving if you're doing sitting meditation. These are the three ways. The first way is like this. That's the first way. The second way is like this. If you're sitting in a meditation hall, you look around to make sure nobody's watching you, and then you go. So that nobody sees you move. Yeah, I know, you do it, don't you? Then the third way is like this. You see the difference? So the first way is moving as you always move, completely unconscious. You're not even aware of what you're doing. The second way is you're concerned what other people think about you, how you're going. And the third way is you've taken your attention from your breath or wherever it was, put it on your hand, moved your hand mindfully. You've now removed that constant irritation and you mindfully go back again. So you haven't interrupted your meditation. But as I said, reacting to every little irritation or every little cramp, that won't be helpful at all either. Once again, a balance between those three. Anything else? John Kabat-Zinn. Right, yes. John Kabat-Zinn. Surya Kulupana has got it. So Mahendra, that's his name, John Kabat-Zinn. Yeah. He is famous for taking mindfulness to the West as a mode of therapy. That's right.
It's stress relief, isn't it? So it's pain relief also.
Everything related to that. He worked with cancer patients, long-term cancer patients and people like that. Yes, anybody else before we finish today?
Thank you, Bhante. That has been a very good session. There have been about 29 people online listening. And when we upload, there'll be so many more. Much merit, Bhante, for giving of your time.
Okay, thank you.
Shall we then end? And we will end this session and hope to see Bhante again soon. And when Bhante comes to Sri Lanka, definitely. Shall we end the usual way by transferring merit to the Devas and the departed, please, Bhante? Could you do that? The stanzas?
Akasanta cha bummanta deva naga mahindika punyang tang anumodetva chirang rangantu sasana.